jumping to Nine Full Moons, they're chalk and cheese, really. So let's start with what were these two films shot on?
They're both shot with the Red MX, which was the second version of the Red camera. There was the Red 1, and then there was the Red MX, which is the Red MX is a little better in low light. Now there's the Red Epic, which is the newer camera, but this was the MX. So it was very good in low light, beautiful camera. We shot with the same camera for Carlos as we shot with Nine Full Moons, although Nine Full Moons we shot with the red prime lenses, which are slightly more slick. But it doesn't change the look that much, actually. What changes what we did with Nine Full Moons that's so different is that we, it's from Tomer, the director. He wanted to make an honest movie that's about his relationship with his wife, their history. He wanted it to be real, gritty, honest, and dirty. So that's the very 70s, very much Serpico, The Conversation, The Godfather. We kept referencing those films. So with Tomer directing, he wanted to go that direction. And I was like, okay, well, here's how we can get there. So we just had a totally different approach. Plus, I wanted to shoot it very differently than Carlos because that was a totally different type of movie. It didn't warrant those type of choices. We could have done it, but I think it would have been weird on Nine Full Moons, which was trying to be. With Nine Full Moons, I wanted to make a classic 70s looking romantic kind of, but dirty and gritty type of film. That's why I say Serpico a lot of The Conversation, because those are like kind of dirty, gritty New York films that have a certain Taxi Driver that have a certain feel that we tried to go for with Nine Full Moons. At least that was our goal. I think it looks a little different than those movies, but I feel like that was our inspiration.
So what are the principles behind achieving a 70s classical look? If you can boil it down.
There's a couple things. Locations. Find locations that are, we shot in Silver Lake and in Eagle Rock, LA, which are not as polished as your Beverly Hills or your Hollywood locations. They're a little dirtier. They're a little lower lower middle class areas. There's more trash on the streets. There's more graffiti on the walls. So it's a little more flavor when you're shooting there. We shot this one particular house that had red walls and it was very kind of David Lynchian, which is where Amy Simons' character lives in the beginning of the film. So that location gave it a certain vibe. So locations, I helped with Tomer with picking locations in terms of what I thought would give us this kind of dirty look. So locations are the number one thing before you even light locations. Number two, lighting a scene with just enough light to shoot it and not anything more. Keeping it kind of dim, keeping it dark, a little muddy. The coloring not super saturated. Mute the colors a little bit. Don't have reds and pinks and greens popping. Try not to use too many primary colors. Keep it held back. So there's not so much color. So if the color's a little toned down, it's a little darker. It's a little dirtier. And we did a little bit of that in post. We added a little grain and added a little bit of muddiness to it by crushing the blacks. You make the blacks darker and you make areas that aren't so black a little darker. That gives it a little bit more of a filmic look. So we did all of those things. It's kind of like a series of 10 or 12 things that we did. But in the back of my mind, every shot I was thinking, would The Godfather shoot something like this? Would they do this? Okay, they might do this. Let's do that. So I would have a couple of films in my head as we were framing and lighting shots. And Tomer and I would both tell the gaffer darker, darker, darker all the time. It seems to be what I say 90% of the time as a DP. I'm not that technical. I go by feel and instinct. I'm not like a technical wizard. I'm more of a guy that I like these 70s movies, and if we could just make the frame look like The Godfather, then we're doing something good. However we get there. So that was kind of our approach.
The film has some really, really fantastic nighttime exteriors. Because the whole film feels nocturnal to me, in that even the daytime scenes, of which, at least from memory, there are very few, but they feel like dusk rather than day.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is there a lot of that would be night for day? I guess.
Well, we didn't do night for day, but we shot it at dusk quite a bit. Not necessarily by choice, because the sun was setting. We had to keep shooting before the sun went down. So the scene between Brian and Brett at the dinner table, which is a very intense scene, was shot after the sun set, and so there's just very soft, twilight going on in that scene. So that helps. We shot in Malibu. We shot at one of the beaches in Malibu at sunset, and the lighting was just perfect that day. So we kind of lucked out there. But we did want to shoot at sunset for that purpose. So we planned it out to shoot at sunset, but we just had to shoot really quickly to get that sunset light. In terms of the nighttime stuff, yes, a lot of stuff was shot at night. And again, Tomer mentioned Taxi Driver to me several times in terms of with all these scenes where Brett's character's driving around because his job, he's a driver. So there's a little bit of a Taxi Driver vibe with his lifestyle. And he's a little bit of a loner. He works on music by himself, or he's driving by himself a lot. So his character kind of dictated to us a little bit of a Taxi Driver mood. He's not on the verge of going crazy like the Taxi Driver character is, but there is a darkness and there is a loneliness to his character that we wanted to capture. So we infused a little bit of the Taxi Driver feel. We didn't go full out Taxi Driver mode because we didn't want to do that, but we wanted to have a little bit of that feel to where he is very much a loner, and that very much affects his relationship with Amy because he's not used to communicating. He's not a very social animal. And the thing about Brett is in real life, Brett is like one of the most social, outgoing, fun people you'll meet. So it really is a performance that Brett is doing in the film. He's very much, holding back, probably more than he ever has in any other film he's ever been in. So the shooting style kind of needed to reflect that.
Carlos spills the beans. You're using these lenses, which is giving your actors an opportunity to play to the lens.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Nine Full Moons, there's the intimacy is really intense. So something I've not heard many cinematographers talk about is just the logistics and the physicality of getting a camera in between actors in really intimate scenes and not disturbing the vibe that they're working on together as performers in the scene.
Yeah, well, that is a great question, and the answer is that it is impossible, and to a certain degree, because you are lighting, you're working around them, so you're going to be talking to set up all this equipment. It's very technical. It has nothing to do with their performance, and you're always in the way of the actors. But the goal of the crew is to be as quiet as we can, as respectful as we can of the performers, so they can do their work. That's why actors have trailers on bigger budget movies, so they can go by themselves and relax and focus. But Brett and Amy and Brian on this film, and also Donald Logue and Harry Dean Stanton and Pamela Adlon, all these great, and Dale Dickey, all these Tipper Newton as well, all these great supporting actors we had in the film. We knew we had great actors, okay, so we didn't really need to do anything fancy with the camera work to capture it. Just be simple. And with Brett and Amy specifically, everything between them was super fucking subtle. Every little moment, there's nothing. There's a couple arguments where they're screaming at each other, but still, even then, it's a lot of things are just very unspoken. They're just like there's like this much of something that they say with their look. There's a scene where she says she got raped, and Brett's character just he doesn't know how to react to it, but he's also like, you're going to make a joke about getting raped. So there's a lot of things that aren't said that are almost more important than what's being said. And in terms of shooting that, yeah, you want to shoot close-ups. And I tell the actors, look, we're shooting this. If they want to know, I'll tell them, we're shooting wide, we're shooting this now, Amy. And sometimes the actors want to know. I don't remember how much they would ask me, but sometimes it's good to tell them if they want to know, so they know how much they can perform without it looking over the top. If you're on a shot like this, anything the actor does is going to be perceived as pretty big on something like this. It helps because Amy and Brett are very, I would say, very subtle actors in general. Both of them, even in Carlos, I would say that Brett's character is pretty subtle with what he does. So when you're shooting subtle performances, just get a nice close up and let them tell the story. You don't need to overdo it with camera work and lighting. Simple is better, and just try to be respectful of them so that they can focus. Does that?
No, that makes perfect sense. You edited the picture as well.
Yeah, he edited Carlos and also Nine Full Moons as well.
when it's your own film, when it's your own baby, when you've lived with it and breathed it for so long in the making of it, and then to sit down and edit the thing, and especially in the case of these two films as well, being done back to back in this compressed time period, I mean, it must be impossible to get the objectivity that you need sometimes. I mean, so how do you do that? It's like editor's block, I would imagine.
Well, that's a great question, but I think, first of all, Brian's made so many films at this point, it's easy for him to be able to remove, even for his own performance, he can look at the actors' performances, including his, and be very honest about what he likes and what he doesn't like. So I think Brian has a pretty easy time adapting to that situation, and I do too, in a sense. I didn't act in it, so I can look at, I remember what I liked from shooting, but basically in the editing, what the editing is pretty much me and Brian in a room watching footage and talking about what we think is cool. Oh, that was cool. Brian's like, oh, this take's really strong. So you start off with just kind of picking takes that you think are good. And most of the time we would agree, sometimes we would disagree, but more often than not we would figure it out and come to,
And then also too, when you're working with, the coverage of 2 shots per take, and also like a lot of the shot list is designed where these people are walking, and so like we have 2 shots to cover the whole scene, like I've done a lot of the editing in my head on that one already, it's kind of how we approach that. There's some scenes with more people where it's like, okay, well, we got to figure out how we're going to cut this together, but for the big portion of that, there's already an edited plan in my head, and that's true of all my films. Like I like to cut out the crap before we make it. You know what I mean? Like,
but there is a dinner table scene in the film, they're the whole family's there, and that's a scene. No matter, it was very carefully planned and shot listed, but in the editing room,
you have so much to cover. So much.
It was just a massive puzzle.
Yeah.
Because you have all these characters' reactions, all these characters saying things, all these characters breaking down.
And then there's also like the technical aspect, like, oh, that take got blown because of this or whatever. So like, okay, so we only have 1 take of that shot. So like all that stuff starts to come together, and then when you get down to it, and somebody else thinks like, hey, maybe you should try cutting in this. You're like, that's impossible. That doesn't exist. Like there's.
Because you got 20 dominoes in a row, and if you just throw something in, the whole sequence gets ruined.
And usually the idea that they want, there's not enough pieces of or dominoes left to support that idea or to rework it that way.
But the table scene was certainly like, there was no clear way to get from A to B to C to D. You start with the dialogue, you cut the people who are talking first, and then you cut the reactions in after that. And then you just recut a few times and just figure out, okay, this shot needs to be this long, we'll take this bit out. And it's Tetris. It's Tetris with personalities and performances, and
my favorite
takes a lot of experimenting.
Yeah. My favorite scene in Carlos isn't even in the movie. It's between the Sklar brothers and the 2 twins and stuff, and they're outside of the house, and there was like this whole segment where we were going to see everybody that was at the house kind of like doing their own thing leading up to the dinner, but it just became like way too much and way too long, and it wasn't working. Except that one scene, and I was like, oh, there's no way to put this scene in.
I kind of want to put it back, but you can't. It's hard.
It just feels so crazy. Like there's no. I mean,
it
but
fucks
it's
with
the funniest scene
flow.
in the movie,
Yeah.
and I was happy to cut it. You know what I mean? Like part of me was like, fuck, but the other part is like, I want to make a good movie, and like just having sometimes it's throwing a great scene and it doesn't really support the movie. So
Don't be precious.
Don't be precious.
I mean, certainly in your case, Rob, because you shot it and maybe you shot some great stuff, but then you have to put your editing hat on and go, all right, I know you really like it. I know that I really like this shot, but
there's great shots in all the films I've worked on that I've personally edited out.
Yeah.
And I hate doing it, but it's like, it's not really, if it's about the shot looking pretty, then you're really fucking up your movie, because as much as you want it to look good, if the audience, all they really care about is what's going on in the story. They don't even care about the acting. Honestly, the first thing the audience cares about is the story and are they interested. Now, the acting makes that story believable. So if the acting sucks, then they're pulled out of the story and they want to leave. But first and foremost is the script and the story and what's happening in this scene that the audience is interested in. And you have to know that as an editor, and so you can cut in to where it starts. And as soon as you have the information you need to get to the next scene, get out of there. Don't wait unless there's something really important to show. So that's what you have to focus on, is that in between, what information gets us to the next point, and then the actors have to bring. I don't want to insult the actors, but the actors have to make that real. So, but you know, how pretty the shot looks, who cares? That's like the fifth most important thing in the scene. So as much as I'm a DP, it's like I kind of try to look at myself more of as a filmmaker, because that's really what you should be looking at, is big picture